Weekly newsletter.
Welcome to Magnificat TV News, dedicated to offering news of the Church. Today is Wednesday, July 18th, 2018. The repression that President Ortega has instituted in Nicaragua does not even respect the Church. The nuncio and several bishops have been assaulted while trying to prevent a massacre. While several German bishops have announced that they will give communion to Protestants married to Catholics, a group of priests rebelled against these bishops for this reason. Cardinal Lorenzi has publicly rejected the possibility that Protestants and divorced and civilly remarried can receive communion. The bishops of Venezuela have published a new statement in which they insist on accusing President Maduro of the tragedies that are happening in their country. Archbishop Sanz of Oviedo has accused the socialistic government of Spain of establishing a totalitarian dictatorship. The people of Nicaragua are suffering a very harsh repression at the hands of their own government. Not even the Church is exempt. The nuncio and several bishops have been assaulted in an attempt of trying to stop a massacre.
The Cardinal of Managua, the auxiliary bishop, and the papal nuncio were some of those attacked by paramilitary Sandinistas in the Basilica of St. Sebastian in Diriamba. This act has been interpreted as Ortega's complete break with the Catholic Church, with which he had maintained a tense but close relationship.
The assault occurred when the bishops traveled to Diriamba to free a group of nurses and Franciscan missionaries under siege in the cathedral of the city by paramilitary groups allied to the government of Daniel Ortega.
The prelates, accompanied by the Nicaraguan Association for Human Rights, gained access to the plaza where the basilica is located. The church was surrounded by about 200 masked vigilantes, as well as dozens of heavily armed police, some of them masked as well.
Inside the church lay the injured as a result of the repression, priests and medical volunteers who were practically abducted. The bishops announced their trip to Diriamba to mediate between the parties, as they successfully did on June 21st in the city of Masaya.
This time, however, the paramilitaries and the mobs did not hide as in Masaya. Something had changed. President Ortega indirectly threatened the bishops last Saturday when he radicalized his position in the face of the crisis. The leader will not move elections forward to the first quarter of 2019, and he accused the bishops of hurling curses at him.
This attack on the bishops had never happened in Nicaragua, indicates Cardinal Briggs. The only similar episode was the Sandinista affront to St. John Paul II in March of 1983, when the Sandinistas interrupted the Mass of the pontiff in the public square. At that time, the Sandinistas shouted, "We want peace." 35 years later, Ortega supporters again shouted the same slogan at the Catholic bishops while they beat them.
The possibility that Protestants married to Catholics be allowed to receive communion is dividing the Church in Germany. There are bishops in favor, there are those against, and there are priests who refuse to obey their bishops.
Despite the letter from the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith disallowing the publication of the German Bishops' Conference Guide for Protestant Intercommunion, 4 German prelates have announced that they will implement in their dioceses, taking advantage of the permission that Pope Francis gave them to that effect.
The Archbishop of the Diocese of Paderborn, Hans Joseph Becker, decided to implement the German Bishops' controversial intercommunion guide that allows the Protestant spouses of Catholics, in individual cases, to receive Holy Communion.
Almost immediately, Bishop Gerhard Fieg of Magdeburg, Archbishop Stephan Hess of Hamburg, and Bishop Franz Joseph Bode of Osnabrück joined Archbishop Becker and announced that they would continue to move forward with intercommunion in their respective dioceses.
Days later, they were joined by the Bishop of Wurzburg, Franz Jung, who went beyond that and invited all the Protestants married to Catholics to receive communion, with the pretext that they were celebrating their golden wedding anniversary in the cathedral.
At this, a group of priests from the Archdiocese of Paderborn have published a statement criticizing the recent decision of the Archbishop to put the controversial guide on intercommunion with Protestants into practice, which they consider unacceptable. The priests have refused to obey the bishop and will not give communion to Protestants.
Cardinal Lorenze, Nigerian and Prefect Emeritus of the Congregation of Worship, has recalled that for Protestants to receive communion, they must first convert to the Catholic faith, and to receive communion in mortal sin is to commit a sacrilege.
During his visit to the Benedictine Abbey of Buckfast in England, the Cardinal asked, "What does the Church do that is as great as the Mass?" And he replied, "The Church has only one possession equal to the Mass, another Mass, nothing else."
The Eucharistic celebration of the Mass is not an ecumenical service. It is not a gathering of those who believe in Christ or who invent a prayer for the occasion. It is a celebration of the mysteries of Christ, who died for us on the cross, who made bread into his body and wine into his blood, and told the apostles, "Do this in memory of me."
The Eucharistic celebration of the Mass is a celebration of the faith community, those who believe in Christ. They are communicating in the faith and in the sacraments and in ecclesiastical communion, not only in Holy Communion, but in ecclesiastical unity with their pastor, their bishop, and the Pope. Anyone who is not a member of that community does not fit in at all.
After Mass, you can have a cup of tea and even a glass of beer and a bit of cake. That's okay. But the Mass is not like that. We wish other Christians well, but the Holy Eucharist is not our private possession which we can share with our friends. Our tea is such, and also our bottle of beer. We can share those.
The Cardinal said that if Protestants wish to receive communion in Catholic churches, they should become Catholic. Come, be received into the Church, and then you can receive Holy Communion 7 times a week. Otherwise, no.
Furthermore, he recalled that Catholics who have committed mortal sins must receive absolution before they can receive the Eucharist. For that same reason, if a person is divorced and remarried, then there is a problem. Christ said that the one who drives away wife or husband and marries another commits adultery. It is not we who made that. It is not a Vatican law. It is Christ who said it.
We cannot be more merciful than Christ. If any of us says he has permission from Christ to change one of the major points Christ gave us in the Gospel, we would like to see that permission and also the signature. Not even if all the bishops agree. It doesn't become so.
Once again, the Venezuelan bishops have denounced the dictatorial regime of President Maduro and have held him accountable for the tragedies lived in their country.
Most of the population does not have the means to cope with the monstrous hyperinflation. The quality of life of Venezuelans, already extremely precarious, is deteriorating by the day, says the bishops in a letter published at the conclusion of their plenary assembly.
They denounce the fact that primarily responsible for the crisis that we are facing is the national government, for putting its political project before any other consideration, including humanitarian, for its erroneous financial policies, for its contempt for productive activity and for private property, for its constant attitude of putting obstacles in front of those who have the will to resolve some aspect of the current problem.
The bishops accuse the government of attitudes of arrogance, authoritarianism, and abuse of power, as well as the constant violation of human rights. They also consider that the country is in diaspora because one of the situations that cries out dramatically from its silence is the phenomenon of emigration, with its terrible consequences.
The attacks of the socialist government of Spain on Catholic education have led Archbishop Sanz, the Archbishop of Oviedo, to accuse it of trying to impose a totalitarian dictatorship.
Monsignor Jesus Sanz Montes, Archbishop of Oviedo and member of the Executive Committee of the Episcopal Conference, has denounced on Twitter the totalitarian shift of the PSOE government in education.
The Archbishop of Oviedo has very clearly expressed his position on the government's announcement to lash out against charter schools, mostly Catholic, and against the subject of religion in public schools, which would no longer be counted in the grade average.
On the social network of Twitter, he has written the following message. With their usual liberticide, they seize our freedom. They are afraid of the truth which makes us truly free, and that's why they want to control it, expelling parents from their children's education and imposing state ethics. The totalitarian dictatorship returns.
Our editorial this week is dedicated to commenting on what is happening in Nicaragua, which is following in the same footsteps as Venezuela.
La represión que el dictador Ortega está ordenando sobre su propio pueblo lleva ya más de 300 muertos y de 2.000 heridos. La gente solo dispone de unas horas, pocas horas por la mañana para poder salir y hacer las mínimas cosas. A partir de mediodía o primera hora de la tarde, los francotiradores disparan a los que no llevan un distintivo del gobierno y se atreven a salir a la calle. El dictador ha ordenado incluso que los heridos no sean llevados a hospitales públicos para ser atendidos y mueren desangrados en las calles. Es una situación que se parece cada vez más a la que se sigue viviendo en Venezuela. Esta situación se ve agravada por otra cosa, el cómplice silencio mundial, mayoritario. Yo me pregunto, ¿qué estaría sucediendo si eso, lo mismo, fuera causado por una dictadura de derechas? Todas las capitales europeas, la mayoría de las ciudades norteamericanas, por lo menos, estarían llenas de manifestantes protestando y pidiendo la libertad en Nicaragua. Pero como lo hace un gobierno comunista, no pasa nada. Silencio casi absoluto. ¿Para qué sirve la ONU? ¿Para promover la ideología de género y el aborto? ¿Solo sirve para eso? Este silencio hace aún más grave lo que está pasando allí, y este silencio es el que hay que intentar romper. Y la Iglesia, hay que decir con dolor, que fueron varios los obispos nicaragüenses, entre ellos el difunto cardenal Obando, que durante un cierto tiempo abundante apoyaron a Ortega. Se cuenta el caso de uno que, junto con todo su clero, fue pagado por el dictador Ortega para ir a Tierra Santa y Roma de peregrinación, todo pagado íntegro por el gobierno. Pero también hay que decir que desde el recrudecimiento de esta represión, la Conferencia Episcopal se ha unido y está en bloque en contra del gobierno. A favor del diálogo, pero de un diálogo serio y honesto. Sobre todo una conferencia episcopal liderada por el valiente obispo auxiliar de Managua, Monseñor Báez. Un ejemplo de esto ha sido lo que ha sucedido en la ciudad de Masaya, que se levantó en bloque contra Ortega. La represión estaba a punto, hubiera causado muchísimos muertos, y ahí se presentaron varios obispos con la custodia, el Santísimo encabezándolos, presidiéndolos, y se logró evitar esa represión. Pero después de esto, Ortega les ha señalado públicamente con el dedo y les ha acusado a la Iglesia, ha acusado a los obispos de estar lanzando maldiciones contra él, eso ha dicho. E inmediatamente, pues ha cambiado la situación. En la ciudad de Diriamba, en la basílica de esa ciudad, estaban encerrados un grupo de franciscanos y de médicos voluntarios que estaban atendiendo a una población exhausta. Fueron rodeados, encerrados en la basílica, fueron rodeados por una turba de encapuchados próximos al gobierno, armados, paramilitares, pagados, por supuesto. que amenazaban entrar en la iglesia y causar una masacre. Allí se presentó el nuncio de su santidad, valientemente, el cardenal de Managua y también Monseñor Báez. Se presentaron los tres allí para intentar repetir lo que había sucedido ya en Masaya y evitar una masacre. Esta vez, como Ortega ya les había señalado con el dedo, no ocurrió lo mismo. Y los tres, entre otros, fueron agredidos por esa turba de paramilitares. Es decir, hay un cambio ya en la situación en la cual ni siquiera la Iglesia que media y que intenta conseguir la paz es respetada. ¿Qué está sucediendo ante esto? Vuelvo a repetir, tan grave como esto es el escandaloso silencio. Apenas un puñado de conferencias episcopales, la de Costa Rica, la de Guatemala, la de España, se han manifestado apoyando a sus compañeros obispos. Incluso el Vaticano ha dicho, a través del secretario de Estado, ha dicho que no va a presentar una queja formal. Insisto, a pesar de que ha sido el nuncio uno de los agredidos. Es verdad que muy probablemente el Vaticano no quiere hacerlo para evitar que la represión sea mayor y sea más sangrienta. Probablemente esta es la causa. Ha habido casos semejantes, distintos, pero semejantes en la historia. Por ejemplo, cuando Pío XII supo lo que estaba sucediendo en los campos de concentración, las matanzas que llevaban a cabo los nazis, decidió ocultar la información para evitar que la represión, sobre todo contra los católicos, fuera mayor, que ya había causado víctimas como por ejemplo Santa Edith Stein o San Maximiliano Kolbe. Sin embargo, la historia suele ser muy dura con estas actitudes, quizá injustamente dura, pero suele ser dura con estas actitudes. Afortunadamente, la Iglesia en este momento, la Iglesia en Nicaragua en este momento está con el pueblo oprimido, de forma total, en bloque. Y yo creo que eso es lo importante, porque el pueblo sabe que puede contar con sus pastores que no le han abandonado, lo mismo que ha sucedido y está sucediendo en Venezuela. La Iglesia está con el pueblo, está con la libertad, está con la verdadera causa de la paz. Y digo la verdadera causa de la paz porque de verdad es no solamente grave lo que pasa, sino que hay una ironía y un abuso en la palabra. Cuando esta turba estaba agrediendo al nuncio y al cardenal Brenes y a Monseñor Báez, el auxiliar de Managua, gritaban: queremos la paz. Fíjate, tienen armas, están pegando a esta gente y gritan: queremos la paz. Pero es que esa es la misma consigna que utilizaron los sandinistas nicaragüenses cuando, durante la visita de San Juan Pablo II, interrumpieron la misa del Papa. Las imágenes son espeluznantes. Cargaron contra la multitud aterrada que estaba en la misa, que se dispersó provocando una estampida, y gritaban lo mismo: queremos la paz. Es típico de los comunistas. Dicen justo lo contrario de lo que practican. Bonitas palabras, malos actos. Queremos la paz mientras están golpeando a los inocentes y aterrando a la población. Bueno, ¿qué podemos hacer nosotros? Creo que hay que acompañar a Nicaragua con la oración, lo mismo que no hay que dejar de rezar por Venezuela. Hay que acompañarles con la oración, pero también romper este cerco de silencio mundial que está protagonizado por esos mayoritarios medios de comunicación controlados por la izquierda. Vuelvo a repetir, si esto estuviera pasando en un país gobernado por un partido de derechas o una dictadura de derechas, qué diferente sería todo. Pero los comunistas tienen bula para eso y para mucho más. Recemos por Nicaragua, acompañémosles con nuestra oración y no callemos para que ellos no se sientan más solos y más abandonados. Hasta la semana que viene, si Dios quiere.
If you wish to stay up to date with what is happening in the Catholic Church, you can do so online at catolicosonline.org. Until next time, God willing.